All right, I think we are live. Yep, looks like we're live. All right, cool. Howdy everyone. Today we're going to be going over the card game SpellArms. My name is Shell Shepherd on the Discord, but my actual name is Ian. This is a game that I've been working on for quite a long time. You guys have seen probably some of the advertising for it. There's probably a couple artists who've been looking at this as well that we used. Today I am going to be using the free demo deck that you can get on the website, but I am going to try to go over as much as I can, in detail as much as I can. I know the quality of the video is not amazing, but I'll do my best to kind of show cards as I use them, as well as kind of give people the idea of how to play. Now, some of these cards are still being worked out. We're trying to adjust the font or change up, how some of them would look. But we are working with various publishers just to make sure that they look as good as they possibly can. Foiling is something that we're also being worked on as well, but that's kind of, an entire process. So let's get to it. So like I said, SpellArms is a trading card game. What that means is that there will be booster packs that players will be able to buy. Currently, the products that are available are the demo decks, like I said, which you can download on our website for free. The starter decks are the current products in production, which will be available once we kind of get that closer to that release date. Again, still working on that. When you pick up a downloaded demo deck, you're going to get a set of cards that is not a normal deck of cards, but will pretty much give you enough to kind of just learn how to play. These are meant just to kind of say, hey, what do I do if I do this? How does this card work in tandem with this? Again, it's just meant to teach you how to play, not necessarily to win you any games. But let's get to it. So when you build a deck, you're going to be building a 60-card deck. You're also going to have a number of cards outside of the deck as well. The first thing you're going to have what's called a contestant. A contestant is like kind of like a commander in Magic or other games where it's kind of an identifier. This is what you're going to be building your deck around, as well as what represents you on the field. Most contestants will have various special abilities, but the main thing you'll notice is that they don't have any faction identifiers. They don't have anything that kind of says, hey, you can use this, or hey, you can't use that. What that basically means is that the deck is open build. So, for example, if you play this contestant and you want to play this card, there's nothing that says you can't or you don't have to. The next other thing you're going to bring in is you're going to bring in what's called a familiar. Familiars are very important. They kind of change up the way the game is played, and they have their own, setup and their own designs. We'll get to that in a sec, just because they're a little more nuanced than that. The other thing you're going to bring into your games is you're going to bring in what's called hand-to-hand, which is kind of your default weapon. As well as your range markers. Now, some would ask, hey, why aren't these on a playmat? Why do they need to be cards? The reason they need to be cards is because some cards in decks may affect them or change the way that you play them in some way. We put those over here. Now, the different range markers come in 3 different groups. There's close range, medium range, and long range. Each player will have their own set of markers, so you don't share with your opponent. So I'll have close, my opponent will have close, and any other players that I'm playing with will also have close range. After you get your familiar and after you get your contestant, you're going to put them in your equipment zone, which basically lets your opponent know that, hey, these are the areas that they're going to be. These are my choices for the game. The 60-card deck is then shuffled, and then we'll kind of go into the different cards, what they do, and how the cards generally work. So most cards are going to be divided into 3 different groups, which is green, blue, and red. Green cards are the cards that are going to be most common in your deck. Oh, Some people might be asking why the demo decks are using just black and white logo art. Mainly because it's free, but also because, like I said, we have a lot of talented artists working on this, and we didn't want to resort to using other images that are pretty unfortunately common within the industry, like AI and such. We wanted to keep it as simple as possible, but also as free as possible too. Like I was mentioning previously, you have green cards, blue cards, and red cards. Green cards are your most common cards. They are also your weakest cards. You can have up to 3 copies of any green card, and you're going to have 30 copies max of all your greens. Blues are kind of your in-betweens. You're going to have up to 20 blues in your deck, and you're going to have up to 2 copies of any blue card. Red cards are your strongest cards, and are on the furthest side of the spectrum there. Copies you can only have 1 of, and they are your most powerful versions of cards. Most likely they are the cards that are going to win you the game. The way we kind of like to balance them is these enable a strategy, these push the strategy, and these finish the strategy. The cards themselves, the different colors, don't have any resource cost, no mana cost, no nothing. If you want to play a card, you take it from your hand, you play it, it does the thing, done. The way we balanced out the way that the resource system works is the level of consistency. Again, you're going to find very often that you'll have more green cards than you have blue cards or red cards. And a lot of decks will actually focus on manipulating these colors, or countering or using strategies around those specific colors as well, or even some cards which want a combination of those colors. So, for example, you might have a deck that is super built around, charging to your opponent as quick as possible. Well, you can't just play a deck of 60 green cards. You have to put in the other colors, which are going to slow down the deck. Or, in the opposite case, if you're playing a deck that wants to play late game, you can't have a deck of only red cards. Your green cards are going to slow you down. Or potentially, depending on what you pick, just mean that you're going to have to search and use your green cards to enable your powerful red cards. The actual cards themselves are broken down into what are called types and subtypes. And we're going to go over those right now. The first type of cards that players are going to run into are what are called skill cards. Skill cards are generally going to be broken down into 3 different types. You're going to have rookie cards, which can only be played during your turn, panic cards, which can only be played during your opponent's turn, and expert cards, which can be played at any time, at any point. You can only play them during specific steps, and there are going to be specifications on the card as to when you can play them, but generally there's no limit to how many you can play all at once. Now, some might ask, hey, can I just dump my entire hand on the first turn? Absolutely, go for it. You're not going to have a lot of cards to play afterwards, but if you have some strategy that just wants to play, a ton of cards all at once, go for it. The game's not going to hold you back because of it. The other type of card players are going to run into are item cards and cosmetic cards. Item cards are pretty simple, whereas cosmetics are a little bit harder to explain. Item cards are cards that are usually going to be put into an area, most likely your equipment zone, and you can have as many copies as you want on the field. So, for example, if I want to have this trap out, I can have 3 copies out, and that's totally okay. Or if I want to have a potion out that's giving me special effects or abilities, I can have 3 copies out, and that's also totally fine. Cosmetics, though, are the exact opposite of this. Cosmetics, you can only have 1 of on the field at a time, but you can have different subtypes. So, for example, in this case, I can have cosmetic attachment and cosmetic elixir, but I can't have 2 cosmetic elixirs on the field, even if they have different names at the same time. Now, my opponent can have cosmetic elixir, even if I have a cosmetic elixir, that's totally fine. We just didn't want players stacking powerful attachments or powerful cosmetics just to get insane combos and abilities that were never intended. Now, there are some cards, of course, that ignore this, but, you know, those are in booster sets and in very rare circumstances. The other type of card, and probably the card that the game is actually based around for a lot of people, are the weapons and SpellArms. Let's grab, where is it? There we go. Weapons are divided into two different subtypes right now, which are melee weapons and SpellArms. SpellArms are kind of like your ranged weapons. They're usually cards with magical effects that are the most common way to attack and deal with your opponent, whereas weapons are usually tend to be pretty specialized, but are also a little more restrictive. There is another difference, though. Most weapons are going to have 3 different identifiers. Some of the items will have it as well. The number on the left is damage. The number on the right is what we call charges. Damage is pretty simple. I attack you, I deal that much damage. In this case, this deals 3, so you take 3 damage. Very simple. Weapons have the exact same thing. Left side is damage. If I swing you with my sword, you take 3 damage. Nothing crazy, nothing fancy. The number on the right is the charges. This is ammo, and this is kind of where the difference comes into play. SpellArms are generally more powerful than your melee weapons, but you can only use them a certain number of times. So in this case, I have these 2 pistols here. They each have 5 ammo, which means I'm going to be able to use this, in the case if I have 1 SpellArm equipped, this pistol 5 times. Whereas this sword, I can use as many times as I want, until it's removed from the field for any reason. The identifier, though, in the middle, the little gem icon that players are going to see when they look at the cards, is the rarity of the item. Rarity is kind of a way for us to differentiate the different colors and kind of separate them into categories as well. So, for example, you're probably going to have your weapons in a stack of rarities, just because a lot of cards will either destroy a weapon and have you search for a lower rarity, or search for weapons of certain rarities or types. All the green cards go common and uncommon. All the blue cards go to rare and epic. All the red cards go to legendary and artifact. So you're pretty standard, MMO style rarity system, but we also wanted it to kind of be as easy to recognize as possible. Let's get going. So we're going to start off by showing kind of the different phases and the different steps. The first phase that players are going to run into is the beginning phase. We then have the auto phase, the first major phase, the attack phase, second major phase, ending phase, and the null phase. However, before you even get to any of these phases, there is what we call the pre-game phase, also known as the portal phase. The portal phase is kind of a unique phase that most players who play card games are not going to be used to, but we're still going to kind of go over it as much as we possibly can. So, once you have shuffled your deck, and once you have drawn your cards, you're going to start the portal phase. SpellArms is played by drawing 7 cards from the top of your deck. Pretty simple. So in this case, we have our 7 cards. You're going to roll off to see who goes first. So I'll roll my opponent, and we'll just say I go first in this case. Once the first player has been established, you're then going to go into what are called portal actions. The player who goes first gets the first portal action. What that means is that you're going to be able to use a portal phase ability on any of your cards that have it on them. All the familiars have portal phase effects, and some of the contestants will also have them as well. Usually these are effects that either change how the game is going to be played, add cards outside of the game, or change up the way the game is even going to start off. The free deck in almost every single starter deck is going to come with Sprite. Sprite is your pretty base familiar. It basically just says you get one free mulligan. And you're going to find that a lot of the familiars are going to be like that. They're going to say, hey, you're going to get free cards in your deck. Hey, you're going to draw a new hand. You're going to sabotage your opponent's hand. You're going to put cards on the field before the game even begins. All sorts of really fun ways. The default weapons, also known as core weapons that you come with hand-to-hand, are not going to generally have any portal phase effects. These are kind of just there in case you don't draw any weapons, just so that the game progresses regardless every single turn. So even if your opponent gets rid of all your stuff, you're still going to have something to essentially attack with and create attack triggers off of. All right, so I'm going to use my portal phase effect in this case. So I would use, in this example, Sprite. I would do a free draw. I would, pass to my opponent, and my opponent would get their portal phase action, and it would go back and forth until both players don't have any portal phase action abilities to use, or they have to pass. Another portal action a player can do, though, is they can do what's called placing their contestant. When you place your contestant, you're going to pick one of the ranges, and you're going to put them down into the that zone. So once the contestant is in that area or that zone, it is now in that range zone, is what we call it. So what that means is that if I have Ire here and I put her in close range, she is now in close range before the game begins. Now, this does count as an action. So I can put my not use my my reshuffle from Sprite if I don't want to, and I can just put down my contestant. Now, the question is, why would you ever do this? The reason you do this is because it allows you to secure first turn no matter what. So if my opponent used, let's say, his mulligan ability, I can just place down my contestant. Even though he went first in the portal phase, that means when the game actually begins, I will go first instead. So for some decks where you just draw the perfect hand, or where you have to go first no matter what, this is a great way to secure that kind of advantage there. All right, so after we have placed down our contestant, we're going to keep our familiar in our equipment zone, and we're going to keep our default in the equipment zone as well. Familiars do have abilities inside the game beyond just the portal phase as well. A lot of times the portal phase ability is going to be balanced around the in-game ability as well. So it might have a really, really awesome, fantastic mulligan or sabotage effect, but it may have an okay other effect as a result. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to pick up our hand and we're going to start the game. In the beginning phase is kind of the start of each turn. We're going to go through each step one by one. So, beginning phase, we go first to the fill step. Fill step is very simple. It's kind of like an exhaust or tap or anything like that in other games. If a card is drained, it is turned sideways, and a card is filled, it is turned face up. So any cards that you have that have been used in your previous turns are now turned face up and are ready to use. Maintenance phase is kind of anything that's kind of resolves before the game begins, before your turn begins. A lot of these cards will say, hey, during the maintenance step, or at the start of the beginning phase, this is kind of where that is going to happen. Draw and weave is kind of our unique draw system for the game. In the draw and weave phase, draw and weave step, you're going to look at the top two cards of your deck. You're going to look and pick one of those cards. Oh, excuse me. We're going to separate them a little bit. There we go. We're going to look at the cards that we drew, and we're going to pick one of them. So one of these cards is going to be drawn. The other card is going to be what we call weaved. A drawn card is very simple. It goes in your hand. Cool. This is a new resource that you can use. Weave cards are placed onto the field as what we call wards. These are kind of ways to protect you against attacks. And it's also why the colors matter too. Green cards. Let me see if I can get a red card from my hand. Oh, I did draw one. Nice. Green cards are going to be providing you one shield. Blue cards are going to be providing you 2 shields, and red cards are going to be providing you 3 shields. We do have markers available for print for players who want to be able to print them off the website. They will also be available in the starter decks. We're going to have a bunch of them that players can just pick up and use. You can also open foils and packs as well, and we're going to have different art, so on and so forth. If you want, you can absolutely use dice or poker chips or whatever you want. I like the cards personally just because they have the numbers on them, but it's up to you and whoever you're playing with. But the main thing is that when you create a ward, you're going to be putting it face down, and you're not going to be telling your opponent what card it is. However, you are going to be telling them what color it is. So in this case, I would draw the card. I wouldn't tell my opponent. And I would put a card face down in a range of my choice. And I would let my opponent know, hey, this is a green card that is providing me 1 shield. I do not have to pick the range with my contestant on. I can absolutely pick wherever I want. However, if I, for some reason, already have a ward out, and it's a new drawn weave step, I have to put my next card, if I want to put in the same range, next in line. I can't rearrange the order of the wards. You can have a max up to 5 wards on the field at any time. So once you kind of hit that 5, that's it. Each range can only have a max of 5. If for any reason you cannot ward, the card that you would ward instead goes to the top of your deck. So there is some incentive to ward as much as possible to kind of create kind of deck manipulation. Now, some players will notice and say, hey, wait a minute. If I'm going through the top 2 cards of my every deck in a 60-card deck, doesn't that mean it's technically a 30-card deck? And you're absolutely right. You know, you will run out of cards very quickly. And some cards you may actually find that even though you want to play it, are better to use as protection against big attacks, or in some cases for abilities that require you to have certain wards on the field. So, for example, in, I think, set 5, depending on the wards you have on the field, will give you different abilities and such. And there are some contestants in the starter decks which have abilities that say, hey, if you place this as a ward, you can take it off from the field and replace it with another card from ward. I think that's Magnifico right now, and he's pretty nuts. All right, cool. So we've played a card. We're not gonna do the same one just for time purposes, but we're gonna just keep going. All right, so I've drawn a card. I've warded a card. Our draw and weave step is done. Next, we're going to move to the auto phase. In these starters and in this first set, there are no cards currently with the auto phase. Auto phase cards are currently being used by NPCs or non-player contestants. We'll be going over those probably in a couple of years, but this phase you can just skip entirely. The first real phase that we're going to be using is what's called the first major phase. This has different steps on it that all kind of happen at the same time. First is when you'll play cards, you'll use card effects, and you'll move your contestant. Every turn, not every phase, you'll be able to move your contestant 1 space. So Ire can move from here to here, or here to here, but you can't skip entire ranges. You do have to go one at a time. So you can't go from long range to close range immediately. You have to kind of go step by step by step. In this case, I'm going to move her over here just as an example, and we're going to keep going. All right, so I'll play my hand. I'll dump out a bunch of cards. I'll use a lot of effects. We're going to play a weapon just for the sake of showing how weapons work. And I'm going to use some poker chips. Actually, I'm going to use some dice instead. And we're going to use some dice just to show off kind of how the charges work and how the attack phase works, just to help out here. Now, you don't have to use dice. You can use whatever you want, as long as your opponent knows, hey, this is how many is on this card. There are going to be some cards that are going to require a lot of tokens, and there are going to be some cards that don't require any at all or very little. There are also different token types, but again, that's up to you and your opponent as long as you have some way to identify them at an immediate glance, and that's the big thing. All right, so we have played a weapon. We've probably played a bunch of other cards. Let's say in this example that we have decided, hey, we put this, we played this card. It's going to go into our grave zone. There are different areas and zones that you can play cards to. The first and most common is going to be your equipment zone. Equipment zone is where items, cosmetics, and weapons are all going to be played out into. This is going to be probably your most crowded zone, but it's also your most important zone. The grave zone is where cards that have been played are going to go to, as well as cards that have been replaced. So, for example, if I say, hey, I want to equip a new weapon, cool, I place it over, and this is going to go to the grave zone as a result. You cannot have multiple multiple weapons of the same type. So I can't have multiple spell arms, but I can have a spell arm and a melee weapon at the same time. Your forbidden zone is kind of your removed from the game zone. This is where if cards have, say, like, hey, send me the forbidden zone, you're probably never going to get them again. Unless a card says otherwise. Special zone is kind of a zone that's going to be kind of transformed depending on the deck you're going to be playing. There are going to be cards that'll say, hey, your special zone becomes your frozen zone, or your special zone becomes your annihilation zone. This is kind of a way that we have created to make some contestants unique, or to make zones outside of just your basic zones. Not every contestant is going to have it, but only contestants are going to be able to make special zones. That was kind of our way to balance out the ability of getting a zone your opponent doesn't have. All right. Let's see here. All right, so after you've played some cards and after you've used some effects, after you've moved, you're going to go into what's called your attack phase. Pretty simple stuff. First things first is you're going to do the attack declaration. What this means is that you've essentially said to your opponent, I have started my attack phase. I have started my attack. This is important timing as it lets your opponent do any abilities or effects that might change up how you attack or adjust the way an attack is done. Same with you in some cases. Attack action is the actual action being performed that shows an attack is happening. This basically means that it's an all-in. So what I'll do is when I declare an attack, I will pick a weapon, I will drain it, I will remove a charge, and I will choose a range to attack. If I have, I can either pick close range, medium range, or long range when I declare the attack. I do not have to attack where the contestant is. If I attack a range with just the contestant and no wards, the damage is just going to go directly to their HP. Players do start with 20 HP, so in this case, if I hit with this weapon that deals 5 damage directly into short range, he's going to take 15. Very simple, very quick. If I attack into a range without a contestant, let's say for some stupid reason I attack long range, no ward, no contestant, the attack would still go through, but nothing would get hit. If I attack this range with no contest on it, but with a ward, I will hit the ward, and then I will hit nothing. In this example, let's say I declare the attack, and you have your contestant here, and you are hitting me in range, so it's going to hit all of them. Once I've declared the attack and have removed, my opponent will then go to what's called the boost step. This is the step you use for sometimes playing cards or for boosting up wards to protect you if you need them. The way you boost is that you'll discard a card, and that ward's shield will get increased by the color of the card. So in this case, if I discard a blue card, it's going to add 2 shields to this red ward and make it 5. Boosting is important, but it's a good way to dump cards that you may not use, or for some reason if you have multiples of in your hand. So let's say I drew a hand of just nothing but weapons. And even if I can only have one up on the field, they're useless in my hand. But with boosting, you can use them to potentially protect yourself for longer turns. All right. In this example, my opponent has decided not to boost, so then we're going to move to attack resolution. In the resolution, you'll move the damage down, going one ward at a time until you hit the contestant. So in this case, I have attacked with 5. It's reduced by 3. It goes to 2 when it hits the contestant. So in this case, if I attack here, goes through, 2 damage, goes to 18, and the ward is destroyed. When a ward is destroyed, once you hit a ward, you're going to reveal them one at a time, and you're going to go through before you apply damage to the contestant. This is because some wards may have abilities or stuff that change up attacks and effects. Oftentimes, these are called trap items, and are cards that are kind of you want to use as wards as a result. But again, we'll go over that. So in this case, I've dealt the 5. I'm going to reveal to my opponent, hey, this was the card. It is a red card, so they know that I'm not cheating. And I'm going to take 2 over here. Now, some might say, hey, what happens if I don't have enough damage to actually get over the shield value? When you attack and you hit the shield, the attack has to meet or be greater than the number. If it's less than, the attack bounces off the shield value, and the shield value resets. So you're not keeping track of how many shields a ward has or any nonsense like that. It hits, it bounces off, that's it, the attack is done. If you have a case of where you have, let's say in this example, multiple wards, you would go from right to left until you go to the contestant, and you would reduce as such until you bounce off. So in this case, I have an attack that deals 5 damage. I'm going to reduce it to 3 to 2. 2 is not equal to 3 or higher than 3, which means it bounces off. However, these 2 wards are still destroyed as a result regardless. In this example, we're just going to get rid of the ward just to keep the game going. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to go into after. So this is for any card effects that have kind of say, hey, at the end of the attack phase or during the after step or anything specific there. Essentially, it's usually cards that'll say, hey, if you successfully hit your opponent, you get some special effect or whatnot. Next thing we're going to go into is we're going to go into the second major phase. Remember how I said you only get 1 movement per turn? If you moved in the major phase, the first major phase, you can't move in the second major phase. However, if you didn't move in the first major phase, you can now move in the second major phase. So you can absolutely attack, move, or move, attack. Kind of dodging between, cover, basically. Ending phase is pretty simple. This is where you clean up any abilities that say, hey, at the end of the turn. And then the hand size check is pretty simple. You can only have a max of 7 cards in your hand. The null phase is usually going to be auto-skipped unless you have no cards left in your deck. And we're going to go over that right now here. So let's say we've been going back and forth with my opponent here. And we have run into the point of where we have no cards left. You're going to go into your null phase and you're going to perform the null check. Because you don't have any cards left in your deck, you would automatically fail your null check. Normally, you would auto-pass your null check. In this case, though, you failed. When you fail your null check, you're going to go into what's called null removal. What that means is that you're going to choose 2 non-core cards on your field, and you're going to forbid them. So in this example, let's say I had my gauntlet and my weapon. So I would choose 2 of these cards, and I would forbid them, which means they're removed from the game. I would choose 2 cards in my hand, and I would forbid them. And I would take 2 damage that cannot be prevented or reduced for any reason. There are going to be some cards that are going to let you go above your max HP of 20. They're usually called giving you armor. When you take that null removal damage, it goes through the armor as well. So if this ever hits 0, even if you have 2 armor, you're still going to lose no matter what. This means potentially that even if you have no cards in your deck, you could potentially eke out a win very slowly and surely. It has happened, but oftentimes what we have found is that the game usually ends by then. So if you're playing a pretty nasty control deck and this is kind of your end game, cool, it's going to happen at some point. If, your opponent doesn't concede by then. All right, cool. So, in terms of anything else that you're going to be running into, most of the cards are going to tell you kind of how they work. Like I said, we've been over the range cards. We talked about contestants, familiars. We've talked about armor. We've talked about HP, the wards, the system, the color, the zones. We are going to have this playmat available for printing on the website for players to use if they want, kind of as a nice reminder. The website is going to get updated with a bunch of stuff, as well as these rules kind of in a picture format as well. Right now we have them in just a giant document. It's very wordy, but we're going to be trying to get that set as quick as we possibly can. Hopefully this video helps. If you guys notice that I didn't cover something, or if you have any questions, by all means. I'm also going to be doing a stream at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as well, kind of just to go over some more spoilers, some reviews. We're going to show off all the contestants that you can open in the starter decks. We're going to be showing off some cards as well from the booster sets, just to kind of show, hey, this is how card creation works. And we're also going to be going over... excuse me. We're also going to be going over some some spoilers as well for what we have planned, as well as a big announcement for a special event Monday. So I hope everybody checks it out. Again, if you have any questions, let us know. You can go on the website, you can go on Facebook, you can go on Twitter, all the social media. I know we also have a link tree on all of them as well. And if you want to check out some early previews of some stuff we're working on, a lot of that is also going to be on the Patreon as well, too, and some exclusive channels to players at certain donation limits. All this is kind of just being done by me at the moment, so you're going to have to bear with me as I kind of learn through all this. And once we kind of get a release date on the cards, a lot of this stuff is going to be updated to look a little more professional as well. We kind of just wanted to make sure we had a release date before we kind of jump the gun a little bit here. So regardless, thank you everyone, and obviously good luck with your games. Let's see